The Art of Being Ruled. Wyndham Lewis. Original publication 1926. 1989 edition. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 12. The Intellectual. Chapter 8. Sorel, Berth, etc., bad syndicalists as regards their own syndic. Where Peggy is answering, in the time succeeding the affaire Dreyfus, those people who accused the intellectuals of being at the bottom of that transaction of having mounted and arranged it, he bears down on them in one of his rushing waves of eloquence, and incidentally produces a very good plea for the automatic. If the intellectual party was clever enough, strong enough, penetrating enough in reality to have set up, to have known, to have been able to set up such a big affair, if it had been of such size and depth as to raise such a big movement of reality, such a big movement, if he had been able to knead in this way, to triturate, to handle, to elaborate, to knead such a big piece of reality, precisely then, they would not be of what we call the intellectual party, they would not have those faults, those vices that we precisely call the intellectual party, this sterility, this incapacity, this stability, this dryness, this artificiality, this superficial, this intellectual. On the contrary, they would be people who would have worked, known, needed, steeped in reality. They would be people who would have soaked in reality itself. There are many people who are highly intellectual, well informed, possessing excellent taste, who are yet nothing, who are quite ineffective. The contrast between the extent of their intellectual possessions and the poorness of the use they make of them is striking and depressing. If that is what we could agree to call intellectual, there would be little objection to the incessant use of the term to abuse and direct contempt with. And we can all agree with Peggy that if it was intellectuals who elaborated and shaped this great mass of reality of which he is speaking, then it would show a lack of judgment to regard them with contempt. But unfortunately Benda's indictment of Sorel and the rest for their use of this term in a sense deliberately aiming at the intellect, rather than at one of the crowd of its less satisfactory possessors or hangers-on, has much justification. They were led to this by the exigencies of platform effect in their appeals to the crowd, and by such influences as that of Bergson's sensationalist philosophy. It is especially strange that Sorel, Berth, and the Syndicalists, with their great sense of reality where the worker was concerned, every worker, that is, except the intellectual worker, should have had so little sense and instinct where they themselves were concerned. Indeed, they had so very little that they spent their time in abusing the intellectual, themselves, from morning till night. Yet, if it is quite sound, as syndicalist doctrine had the honor of first emphasizing, that a baker or miner must see and feel things as an average baker or miner, that you cannot set a baker to rule and legislate for a miner, or a miner for a baker, any more than you would ask an ant to take his orders from a moth or vice versa, it is equally true that men writing pamphlets and books, and all that entails, like Sorel or Berth, also have their syndicalist esprit de corps, or should. And why, in the name of all that is not insane, should they be ashamed of it? Why, as Sorel and a multitude of the intellectuals have done, should they repudiate each other with every resource of invective, and hold the intellect, the instrument of all their life and power, up to scorn? What would you think of a baker who is always talking with an immense contempt for those half-naked, whitened figures who spend their horrible lives in the disgusting occupation of shoveling pieces of dough in and out of a filthy oven? Or of a miner who never referred to the miner except as that black-faced devil, as malignant as despicable, who spends his life hitting his Mother Earth with a hammer? That is a mystery that I believe, in the foregoing pages, I have done something towards clearing up. Notre sujet n'est pas de discuter les doctrines de nos contemporains, mais de marquer les valeurs qui s'y expérimentent. We are not discussing the doctrines of our contemporaries, but noting the will that finds expression in those doctrines. This could be used to describe in the main the object of this essay. The difference no doubt would be that here, having laid bare the will concealed beneath the doctrine, we analyze it, and that when the doctrine is seen to flow too deliberately from a not very beautiful will, by which it is pumped out by the gallon, the doctrine loses its importance automatically. Hence, if we have succeeded in some instances in discrediting the will, it is to be hoped that indirectly we may have damaged the doctrine.